Charlie Worsham, your host for Mississippi on the Map, a podcast brought to you by Visit Mississippi. This podcast explores why Mississippi is the birthplace of America's music. William Faulkner once said, "To understand the world, you must first understand a place like Mississippi." Mississippi is home to some of the greatest stories and storytellers of all time. Join me as we explore the history of the birthplace of America's music and learn about those who put Mississippi on the map. Hey everyone, it's Charlie Worsham, your host for Mississippi on the Map. Today we present to you the Season 1 finale of this podcast. I will be the guest. Since there's no one asking me the questions, what I actually did was write down the interview questions and just answer them right off the page. So today's episode will sound a little different than the others have. But I wanted to take a moment first to say thank you to Visit Mississippi, Maris West and Baker, all the guests, Troy Dixon, our sound engineer, everybody who made this podcast happen, made it possible. I am so grateful to get to do this work. I am so grateful for the stories that we've captured in this podcast. And I hope you'll enjoy today's episode and stay tuned for Season 2. Oh, I love this. I wrote these questions out for myself, and I want to talk about this. I want to start with my earliest memories of music. Growing up in Grenada, we would go to church, and of course I remember the church piano and the church organ. But the memory that sticks with me the deepest in terms of music, and actually one of my first memories, period, is being a toddler age, really a baby maybe, sitting in my dad's lap at his drum kit. So my dad, my early years, he played drums in a local band, sort of a cover band, but he had a drum kit set up in actually my room. It's where it ended up getting set up. And my earliest memories are sitting in his lap and him letting me take the drumsticks, banging on the drums and the cymbals. And I remember tagging along at some of his gigs early on and recognizing a connection between when the lights would go down and the music would start and when grown-ups would stop acting like grown-ups and start acting like kids. And I thought, whatever that is, that magic power of sound makes grown-ups have fun like kids. I want to do that. I want to be around that. I remember getting to hit the drum during sound check and hearing it through the speakers and thinking it just felt powerful to be a part of something that could be so loud. And so from that point on, I think my fate was sealed, if you will. But one of the great things about growing up in Mississippi is I can point to any age in my childhood, and there's music all around. Growing up in the edge of hill country there, in Grenada, you know, you're a 15, 20-minute drive west. You're going to be in the edge of the Mississippi Delta, where so much of our great music was born. And I remember many, many trips throughout my life. First bands that I played in were bluegrass bands, and all the other guys in the band were grown-ups, and they all lived in the Delta. So we'd drive out to the Delta and go play at country clubs and birthday parties and graduations and bars, and eventually graduated to the bar bands, and our guest Craig Wiseman, he's not the only one. We got our education in those bars playing 4 sets of music a night, 4 hours of music, and trying to keep people dancing, trying to keep people drinking. Music was everywhere. It was on the radio. On the way to school, I remember Joe Diffie, his songs on the radio always popped a little harder than anyone else's. And that 15-minute drive to school every morning, B100, the radio station in Grenada, that was telling me what was going on in the bigger world. Or our big family trips, it was AM radio, WSM 650 AM, carried the Grand Ole Opry. And we'd go to Opryland Theme Park and ride the rides all day and then see the Grand Ole Opry at night. And I knew when Johnny Russell came on, hey, he was from Mississippi. Marty Stuart came on, hey, he was from Mississippi. So from a very early age, I was exposed to music of all stripes. And from a very early age, I had an awareness and an understanding that this music that I loved was connected to the place where I was growing up. Whether that was sitting in my dad's lap, of extremely local connection to the music, or seeing Marty Stuart on the Opry, hearing him on the radio. Oh, he's from Philadelphia, Mississippi. I knew where I was growing up was someplace special. If you were a musician, there was something special about being from Mississippi. I have so many heroes and mentors as well. I joke to people that I've been
involved in music since I struck out at T-ball, and that's pretty much literally true. I think I did actually strike out with the baseball in front of me on a stand, not moving, and I still couldn't hit it in 3 tries. But I think about the people who gifted me this knowledge and understanding of music and gave me a leg up, gave me a start. Of course, it started with my parents, my mom and dad. They made sure once I took an interest in music that I had a resource to learn about it. And that first resource was Cindy Dugan. And I'd go every week to piano lessons, and she gave me a technical understanding and knowledge of music, a way to learn an instrument with the proper technique, having my hands in the right position on the keys, understanding the theory behind the notes that I was playing. And she also left room for me to use my ear. If there was a Vince Gill song on the radio and I really wanted to learn it and I couldn't find sheet music for it, she was perfectly fine with me picking out the notes, just using my ear. I had no idea then how helpful that would become for me as a music professional in Nashville, where we use the national number system and we use our ears. Not, we kind of write our own charts. There isn't a notated part for us to play. We come up with that using our ears. My other main music teacher early on, Larry Wallace, we'd drive to Starkville every Wednesday night, and he would teach me banjo. And he gave me a whole other type of technical understanding with the 5-string banjo, how to make each note ring out to the best it could. But he also hipped me to a collection of recordings that are required listening if you want to be a bluegrass musician or a country musician. And then I can't count the many teachers I had between all the high school band programs, not just marching band and concert band, but jazz band, and just free time hanging out in the band hall after class. I was a music teacher or a teacher's kid, so I was around the school after the bell rang every day and had to do something and kill the time one way or another. So if I didn't already have an instrument with me, I'd go to the band hall and hang out with whoever was there with an instrument. And then all the unofficial bands that I played in, the bands we formed in middle school to impress the girls. I have a distinct first memory of learning a song to impress the girls. It was Bop by Hanson. And I remember I could play it when we were at the party, and it was impressive to the ladies that I could do that. No luck was involved, but still, I at least turned some heads, I guess you could say. And then the more official bands, those bluegrass bands, they were all Mississippians, all these guys out of Greenville that were doctors and veterinarians, but their passion was with music. And they had been rock and rollers with my dad, but at that point in their lives, they didn't want to lug the 60-pound amp into the club, and a mandolin is a much easier thing to carry. So they transitioned into bluegrass, and I was right there ready to meet that moment with my banjo. One of the greatest educations of my life came to me through bar band experience in high school. That's how I spent my weekends. And I think about a guy named Haley Bennett, who was the drummer in our band. He taught me to show up early for things. He taught me to bring your own equipment. He always had microphone cables, and he was always set up ahead of when he needed to be set up. He taught me about entrepreneurship. We printed up our own T-shirts, had our own logo. And then Rick Lambert, one of the great guitar heroes in my life, from Hernando. So many of the things that I play on guitar come from those countless hours at the Walnut Street Blues Bar in Greenville, or Studio 55 in Grenada. We played the Tiki bar there, playing the various country club gigs and all the different little holes in the wall between Jackson and Memphis. Between Rick Lambert and B.B. King records, that's how I bend a note on a guitar. I'd always wanted an electric guitar, was always holding an acoustic instrument, not an electric. But one of those fateful trips to Nashville, I'd saved up enough money to buy a Fender Telecaster, and I went home, plugged that thing into a PVPA system, which probably at the time had been manufactured in Mississippi as well, which is pretty cool. But playing that guitar through a PA system, playing along to a B.B. King record, that's how I learned to play electric guitar. So no shortage of musical heroes and mentors. Speaking of the hero side of that, I could always point to Marty Stuart. I'd say he was the first of many who had gone out into the world and made a dream happen. And watching him on TV or hearing him through the airwaves, I could say, man, he's doing it, but he's from Mississippi. If he could do it, then maybe I could too. So that was always like rocket fuel for me. As a matter of fact, one of my standout memories growing up, we have a festival in Grenada, and for a few years there we'd get some national country touring acts. And the year for me was the year that Marty Stuart was on the bill. And as luck would have it, Marty got rained out about 4 songs into his set and had to be pulled off the stage, thunder, lightning, the whole thing. And his bus had to leave in the mud that was quickly accumulating there. And I was equally fired up and crushed because there was my hero, and then my hero was gone. But in the wake, in the mud puddle left behind his bus leaving in that storm, where it had been parked was his bus rug, his little bus mat where you'd wipe your feet before you got on the bus. And my mom saved it from the mud and cleaned it off the next day. And every day from then on until I left home for the bigger world, that's the first thing my feet would hit when they touched the ground was Marty Stewart's bus welcome mat. And now I can call Marty Stuart not just a mentor and a hero, but a friend and a peer. And I love that full circle nature of my childhood growing up in Mississippi. You know, another part of my musical growing up in Mississippi, and this is true to this day, there's a quality to the air and a stillness. You know, living here in the heart of Nashville, it's a growing, bustling, busy city. And you can't really see the stars too great at night. There's a lot of light pollution. That's not to knock it. I love Nashville. And Nashville was always that big city just over the state line in my mind, you know. But there's something peaceful and quiet and still about the Pine Hills behind the house where I grew up. And this is especially true in my high school years. I had a mentor named Norbert Putnam. Norbert Putnam is known here in Nashville for being a legendary session bassist, played on a bunch of Elvis Presley records, played on tons and tons of hit records here in Nashville, had his own studio, Quad Sound, that for years and years was a major hub for very important records here being made here in Nashville. He also produced Jimmy Buffett for a good stretch there, including his Margaritaville album, produced Joan Baez. Well, he married a Grenada, Mississippi girl, Norbert Putnam did, and he set up a recording studio in a building downtown. And he took me under his wing, taught me about recording. And we're sitting here in my home recording space in Nashville, where I've sent overdubs for records that you've heard on the radio. And I learned all of that from a guy in Grenada, Mississippi. And as a matter of fact, one of the great gifts of my teenage years was that Norbert let me take all that bar band gig money and spend it on, I bought his recording gear for a song. I mean, it was a fraction of what he should have sold it to me for. But it let me get started, let me have a way to record myself in my own backyard. And so I would record everything I knew, all the fiddle tunes, all the cover tunes, until I ran out of stuff. Then I needed new material, so what did I do? Started writing songs out of necessity. First 2 songs I wrote were jingles for the local businesses, Miss Trish's Barbershop and the Cross Country Feed and Seed Store. And they played it on the radio. That was my first time hearing a song I wrote, and hearing my voice on the radio was jingles for Grenada, Mississippi businesses. So if I had to ask myself, you know, what about growing up in Mississippi best prepared me for a life in music and a career in music? Well, it's everything. You know, I mean, it started with parents who believed in the dream I was chasing and made sure that I got the lesson, that I got the fiddle camp ticket, that I got to go see the concert, that I got the book or the record, whatever was going to inspire me, or the instrument. And then having local heroes to cheer me on, whether it was Norbert or all those guys in the different bands I played in, or a guy named Mo Hubbard who is still kicking around in Grenada, Mississippi now, and popping up on the occasional gig. You know, it was a whole community of people that gave me a gig to play in a nursing home, a gig to play. I mean, I literally played a gig in the clothing section of the Walmart in Grenada. And neighbors down the street around Christmas let me, you know, ride my bike down the street and go sing a song for them. People cheer me on when I played on the Grand Ole Opry stage at 12 years old. Nearly 100 people came up from Grenada to cheer me on. So having that support prepared me. Having those resources prepared me. And then zooming out, as I came of age, recognizing that Elvis Presley and B.B. King and Marty Stuart and Muddy Waters and Pop Staples and Paul Overstreet and Mac McAnally and Jimmy Buffett, all of these heroes of mine, they came from Mississippi. And so, like I said earlier, if they came from Mississippi and they made it happen, then maybe I can too. Gave me confidence. And driving to those gigs, just the lonesomeness of driving down a Delta road, getting home from a bar gig at 2, 3 in the morning. It's space enough, stillness enough, quiet enough for your dream, which dreams and the voice of the heart are quiet, shy things. But you get to a place still enough and quiet enough, they come up to the surface and you can actually hear what they have to say. And if you can do that and you can harness that, you can do anything. So often on the podcast, I talk to guests who grew up in Mississippi but went on to conquer the greater world. And I usually mention Willie Morris and his memoir, North Toward Home, a book he published in the late 60s. Willie Morris being one of our patron artistic saints back in Mississippi, and I didn't know this until doing this podcast. I always thought Willie Morris was as well known, was as much a household name as Elvis Presley, and certainly within Mississippi he is. Outside of Mississippi, I get a lot of people scratching their head when I mention his name. They don't necessarily know who he is, but he went on from Mississippi roots, growing up in Yazoo City, to college in Texas, to being a Rhodes Scholar in Oxford, England, to being the youngest ever publisher of Harper's magazine in New York. And he wrote this book, North Toward Home, that was really a documentation of his life, stepping outside of Mississippi for the first time into the greater world. That is a watershed moment for any Mississippian who leaves the state to begin chasing a dream and then comes back changed. It's a bit of a hero's journey, if you will. So I ask people about that, about their first experience leaving the state. How do you carry your Mississippi with you? What do you notice about Mississippi from outside that you never did see or appreciate from within? And for me, that experience was going to college in Boston at a place called Berklee College of Music, which is a very international school. It's not really in a campus setting. It's smack dab in the middle of a bustling Boston, Massachusetts city, with subways and buses and a lot of traffic and people yelling, and the best culture shock a kid from Mississippi could have. And meeting an international student body and being asked, where are you from, and saying Mississippi, and seeing both. I would see two things when I talked about being from Mississippi. They'd go, oh, wow, you're from the birthplace of America's music. You're from where Muddy Waters is from. Oh my gosh, what's that like, And then also I think people having preconceived notions about ideas of race and ideas of bigotry, things that because of certain parts of Mississippi's story, Mississippians sometimes get labeled with sort of a blanket label. And so for me, that stepping into the bigger world was a double-edged sword. It was this opportunity for me to feel gratitude for where I'm from and feel the immensity of the rich musical heritage of where I'm from. And then it also, at times, was reason for me to put my guard up, because I thought, wow, people have a preconceived notion about me just because of where I'm from. Pretty quickly in those years, though, I learned that the great joy of a moment like that is being able to flip someone's perception of what that person believes because of where they're from, to show them through what I had to say, the way I had to act, that actually, no, your preconceived notions are wrong, but your idea about how rich the musical heritage of where I'm from, and you were on point with that, and come on down during the Christmas break, I'll show you. We'll go to Po Monkey's Lounge, R.I.P., one of my favorite juke joints. But I do think, you got to kind of step out of Mississippi to fully appreciate it, to be able to come back full circle with a new understanding of where you're from. And I feel like Willie Morris wrote the book on that literally in North Toward Home. That's why I talk about it so much on the show. So I'm a few things here in Nashville. I'm an artist, a singer-songwriter. I sing and record and write and perform my own songs. But I'm also a musician, and I love being a musician, a session player, and a touring musician. And I'm a songwriter. I boil it down into two things. I'm a storyteller and a musician. I get my storytelling through what I sing and the songs I write, and the opportunity I have, especially through this podcast, to invite people in, have a conversation, like be a bit of a hillbilly Anthony Bourdain, if you will. And in all that songwriting and all that storytelling, I love to ask any musician on the show, what's the most Mississippi lyric you've ever written? And I've got multiple answers for that. My debut record, Rubber Band, has a song on it called Mississippi in July that was never a focus track or a single like you hear people talking about when they're promoting their records. But from day one, it's been a fan favorite. And to this day, I can sing it at any show of mine, and I get a reaction from it. And it's if you've listened to the Craig Wiseman episode of this podcast, he talks about some of his songs, like his first number one, If the Good Die Young. It was a page right out of the story of his life. You know, he was cutting up before church one day, and that's the first verse you hear Tracy Lawrence sing in the version of that song and story that you know. But for me, Mississippi in July was a real thing. There was an old flame. I was visiting home, looking in the paper and looking through the, wedding announcements, obituaries. Oh, wedding announcements. Who's that? There's my old flame. She's getting married. Where? Mississippi. When? July. Okay, I'm going to file that away in my song idea bank and then write the song, and there it is. But literally the most Mississippi lyric I've ever written is a song called I-55 because, from an early age we were coming to Nashville for lessons, music festivals, music concerts. Again, pointing to the Craig Wiseman interview, if you hear him talking about his move to Nashville, he pretty quickly pinpointed the exact midpoint. It was exit 100 or something between Tuscaloosa and Huntsville for him. That's the midway point between Hattiesburg and Nashville. Well, for me, it's Jackson, Tennessee. That's the exact midway point between Grenada and Nashville. And I'd always turn on the way back home, doing the loop around Memphis, and you turn on to 55 South, and within 3 minutes, you're passing the exit for Graceland. And then with another 3 minutes, you're crossing the state line into Mississippi with that beautiful sign, the blue and red sign that says birthplace of America's music, and for good reason. And I had a producer tell me once, he's like, man, I like your records, but I can't listen to them and figure out where you're from. He said, I want you to think about that making this record with me, have a song on there so people know where you're from. Now, what I did know is he was talking about the sound of Mississippi and your playing and your fingers. But I took it literally, and so I said, well, exit 206 off of I-55. I literally write the directions pretty much to my growing up house in this song, I-55, off my sophomore record, Beginning of Things. But the thing about that song that I love so much is if nobody else in the world had ever heard it, I took that song back home to Grenada and played it for friends. We sing about hanging out in the Chaney's parking lot. The old drugstore there where every small town has it, the small town parking lot where all the kids hang out on the weekend. And it made me sort of a hero in a way in my hometown just by writing my story. So I-55, the song, this little lake town is all we got, but I love it most for what it's not. And those kids in the Chaney's parking lot, that's me 10 years ago, or maybe more like 20 years ago now. But there's a lot more Mississippi I have in my heart to write on the page, so maybe stay tuned for the complete answer to that question. Another question I ask a lot of my guests is, when have you felt most proud to be from Mississippi? And for me, I have a lot of answers to that. We're taping this in December of 2025, but January 1st, 2026, I'll be on a float representing Mississippi in the Rose Bowl parade. And there will be a giant Kermit the Frog behind me because Kermit's from Mississippi, and I'll be playing and singing songs about Mississippi. And that's going to be a moment I was most proud. I'll look back and say I was most proud to be from Mississippi. Oddly enough, another parade was one of those moments. I was in the Grenada High School marching band. In 2001, we had the opportunity to be in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. This had been booked, before summer break that year. But if you're doing the math, September 11th, the tragedy of that day happened after we had committed to the parade and before the parade would happen. And I remember being on Grenada school district buses, and they took us down to the southern tip of Manhattan, and we drove around Ground Zero, and it was still smoldering. And I was so proud to be in that parade representing Grenada, Mississippi, even if the folks on the news called it Grenada, which is probably the technically correct way to pronounce it, but that's not how we say it. I was so proud. And of course, music was the vehicle that got me there. I'm so proud to be from Mississippi. Every time I'm introduced on the Grand Ole Opry stage, anytime I'm around my friends and heroes from Mississippi, Marty, Stuart, chief among them, I've been so proud to represent Mississippi through the work on this podcast. That is definitely one of the times I've been most proud to be from Mississippi. because as much as I thought I knew about Mississippi, I've learned that and then some, that much and then some, through researching for these conversations. You know, the books I've read this year have taught me so much about the story of Mississippi. And the more I learn about Mississippi, the more proud I am to be from Mississippi. So I'd like to speak a little bit about what the experience of hosting Mississippi on the Map has taught me about Mississippi and Mississippians, and also mention like what's been the most surprising thing about this experience. And I'll tell you, I believe it's really important, especially through the lens of Mississippi, not to shy away from the harder parts of our story, because when we can have an open and honest and heartfelt conversation about everything that Mississippi has been and was and is, then we can truly bring healing to those dark chapters, and can also at this very same time be as proud as ever of who we are and where we're from. And particularly researching for my interview with Wright Thompson, he wrote a book in the last year that was published called The Barn, that is a very in-depth study of all the forces, the historical factors, if you will, surrounding the abduction and murder of Emmett Till. It happened in 1955. It's one of the worst crimes in the history of our nation, and it happened in Mississippi. And what I learned, yes, it's true, some of the most heinous events of the civil rights era, of the Jim Crow era, of slavery, yes, they happened in Mississippi. What I didn't think about and what I don't think we appreciate enough is that for every perpetrator of those heinous crimes, there is also a hero in the story, and those heroes are pretty much all from Mississippi too. Fannie Lou Hamer, Medgar Evers, James Meredith, and the list goes on and on and on. Names that you would know, names that you really wouldn't know, and even someone like me who considers themselves pretty educated on that chapter of history, I learned about a lot of people reading The Barn and talking to Wright. And I think that those heroes' lives should be celebrated. And I'll tell you something else, in doing the work of this podcast, something that I learned about Mississippi and Mississippians is just how excited people who aren't from Mississippi are to talk about how much they love Mississippi and Mississippians. If you go back and see our first episode with Ketch Secor, he has about this much claim to the state. He rolled around on an ant bed in South Mississippi at a state park somewhere when his family was living in New Orleans, and that's how he learned to walk. He learned to walk in Mississippi and jump and run, because fire ants will make you do that. But he knows even things I didn't know about the history of Mississippi music, because he is a grateful scholar of that story and that history and that art. And he jumped at the chance to sit with me and talk about Mississippi. People from all over, people from all walks of life, stop me on the street or wherever I cross paths with them, and remark on the work of this podcast and the things that they gleaned from listening and watching. So that's something I'm grateful for, and something I didn't realize is that Mississippi is in fact pretty beloved in a lot of people's hearts, and those who know. I don't think enough people know, but that's what I'm working on through this podcast. And Mississippians, what have I learned? Something I never thought I'd get to do, that I got to do through this podcast, was spend a day on site at Parchman, the state penitentiary. And I'll be honest, I was nervous what I was going to see that day, because I watched the documentaries, I read about the history, and it's a dark, painful history. Even just the premise on which that prison was founded 125 something years ago is really, really dark. But then I met Superintendent Mark McClure. I met LJ and Houston, who you can go back and listen to their stories on their episode of this. And I saw for myself that Mississippi is as much leading the change for good as anyone. Prisons across the country are calling the folks at Parchman to say, how did you do this? In 2020, you had these terrible riots and horrific conditions, and now you're leading the way for proving that rehabilitation can happen and how to do that, how to implement true rehabilitative programs and a mindset and bring that to Parchman. And to me, that's the work, is doing that repair that Superintendent McClure is doing, that LJ and Houston are doing. They're members of the Parchman band. They travel the state playing music, because of course they do. Of course you would if you were from Mississippi. I mean, even the guys in stripes can teach us something, perhaps more than anyone, that Mississippians are resilient. Mississippians are way more complex than you think they are. They've thought of these forward-thinking things, most likely, that you maybe didn't even think they were capable of thinking of, and they're already working on it. The barn where Emmett Till was murdered is just very recently an agreement was made for it to be purchased and preserved as a museum and a historic site that it deserves to be, so that its story can live on. And like I said, not just the story of the horrible things that happened, but almost more importantly, the story of the heroes who turned that whole thing around and brought some repair and some redemption into the picture. I'd say the thing that most surprises me is how much of Mississippi I've yet to see. I have a whole bucket list now of places in the state where I grew up I've never seen that I got to go see. The Skynyrd crash site is one of them. But at the top of the list is Medgar Evers' home, and that's the home where he was assassinated. And I am shocked that it is not a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I think that it is as much a part of our story. My wife and I are watching the Ken Burns documentary on the American Revolution right now, and I'm a big nerd and I love documentaries. But as I watch the story of our American Revolution, I have developed a theory that there are two origin stories to America. And you go to New England, you go to New York and Philadelphia, and you can see that original story of America and us rebelling against England and gaining our independence. And that's all well and good, and everybody should go see the Liberty Bell and all of that stuff. But as much as that is a part of our story, so is the story of Mississippi and the America that was born when Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address and gave the world the Emancipation Proclamation. That America, that Philadelphia, that Liberty Bell, that New York, that Pilgrims, if you will, and the whole origin story, that's Mississippi more than any other. It's this region. It's the South, the Southeast particularly, but it's Mississippi. Mississippi's story is America's story. And we can learn so much from that, especially in this moment. And for the love of God, somebody, let's get Medgar Evers' home as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, because it deserves to be that.
More than 100 years ago, Black sharecroppers and laborers in Mississippi gave America its own musical identity, the blues. The sounds of Mississippi gave rise to gospel, gave country its twang, jazz its blue note, and rock and roll its king. Discover music's roots and future in Mississippi, the birthplace of America's music. Learn more at visitmississippi.org/music.
What do I recommend to someone curious about learning more about Mississippi? Well, hold on real quick. This is just a small piece of the stack of books I say you need to read. Myrlie Evers, For Us the Living. I think Myrlie Evers should be on a coin or a bill in American currency. Medgar, obviously, as well. If you go to the Civil Rights Museum in Jackson, which is a part of this Mississippi I never realized was there this whole time, and somehow I had never seen it. Thankfully, through the work of this podcast, I was able to visit it. And it is a world-class museum. It is powerful, powerful, powerful. And thank you to former Governor Haley Barbour for being a part of championing and making sure that space exists, because it's important. But read this story and tell me that she doesn't deserve to be on money. Because after he was gone, she carried his legacy forward right up to the present day. This, of course, I was talking earlier about the barn. The thing about the barn I didn't mention is it ties in what's going on with the blues, what's going on with agriculture and technology. And I didn't know this, but, prior to 1923, Mississippi was basically Saudi Arabia. Cotton was what oil is now. And, I ask people on the show, what do people get wrong about Mississippi and Mississippians? Well, they think that we're small time or, off on the sidetrack. Mississippi is central and has been for a long time, to everything going on in the world, not just culturally, but our agriculture, our industry. We are really in many ways right at the front and center of what's going on today, and that's been true for a long time. But the barn can help the person who reads it gain a perspective of how, as farming became mechanized, it was harder to get a job on the farm, and all these guys that were doing sharecropper work and playing acoustic blues on the front porch, like Muddy Waters, like Pop Staples, like Charlie Patton, all of a sudden this music needed to shift and get electrified, and the only way to do that was for it to go. And it did that because the jobs on the farm were drying up, so they went up to Chicago. They had to compete with the noise of a club. Now you got the electric blues. Now you got Muddy Waters. Now you got B.B. King in Memphis. It's a fascinating story, the barn. And I never knew that, the first mechanical cotton picker and the first Fender electric guitar were launched the same year, and that's not by accident. This is the book I was talking about earlier, too. I'd almost say start here, Willie Morris, North Toward Home. This is the story of every Mississippian who has ever grown up in that state, gone off into the bigger world, and made a name for themselves and come full circle back. Because what you don't know, if you only read this book, is after the last page of this book, Willie Morris moves back home and lives out the rest of his life there, giving back to the community. Here's one, the story of William Winter, one of the great governors in the history of Mississippi. And his life story is fascinating, and I had no idea how consequential he was to moving the state forward, and the fact that people were taking notice of him far beyond our borders. I think he could have gone on to do whatever he wanted in politics. I dare even say he could have been president if he wanted, but he loved Mississippi, and he loved being there and staying there. And this was just a joy to read. But also, he's a Grenada boy, and I'm a Grenada boy, so thank you, William Winter. And there are other great books, so many great books. Anything by Will D. Campbell. What I talk about Will D. Campbell probably to a point that guests on this show get annoyed, but Will D. Campbell has Nashville ties. He was a professor at the University of Mississippi for a while. He actually had to leave. It was during the Civil Rights Movement, and he was, I think, so outspoken at the time, it was dangerous for him to continue, so he resigned. He marched with Dr. King. He marched with John Lewis. He was there at the Lorraine Motel hours after Dr. King was assassinated. He was good friends with so many people here in Nashville. He was the only guy that Waylon Jennings would allow to talk about God with him. He was sort of like a part preacher, part civil rights leader, part bootlegger, part author. And I love everything that Will D. Campbell ever said in an interview and everything he ever wrote. Brother to a Dragonfly would be a great place to start with Will D. Campbell. And then, of course, all the great people of letters. Another Grenada person, Donna Tartt. I remember one Christmas being at the Presbyterian Church for a Christmas Eve service, and my mom tapped me on the shoulder and whispered, that lady sitting in front of you, that's Donna Tartt. She's written New York Times bestsellers, and just great literature to begin with, whether it's sold or not. And of course, John Grisham, William Faulkner, Eudora Welty, Jesmond Ward, John T. Edge. There are so many great writers from Mississippi, and I draw a lot of my inspiration for music from people of the written word. So read those books and come visit. So if I could convince someone to make their first ever trip to Mississippi, where would I send them and why? I think I'd have to tell them, come in through Memphis, drive to Memphis and then head south, fly into Memphis and then head south. Head south through Tunica and the Delta, the old Highway 61, and drive all the way down, stop in Clarksdale the first night. Get you a beer at Red's. You got to see Oxford. There really isn't necessarily even a one place. It's just, I say first because I think starting in Memphis and then ending maybe somewhere around Natchez, making your way to New Orleans, that's the trip. For me, what you're really doing is you're traveling the path that American music took, just in reverse. New Orleans was such a port and such a hub for different cultures and jazz music and everything. But Mississippi is the backbone. Those roads that run north to south in Mississippi, that's the backbone of American music, where the blues was born. You can drive a little further east, where Meridian is, and see where country music was born. Jimmy Rogers and the Rail Yards, he was kind of fusing the blues with country music, or what it was called at the time, hillbilly music. The Mississippi Sheiks doing the exact same thing, fusing the blues, but they had a fiddle in the band. And their song "Sitting on Top of the World" is one of the great songs in the country music canon. I think you got to see it all. I think you have to see Natchez. You have to see Oxford. You have to go to Jackson and go to the Civil Rights Museum. I stop through Grenada, get you a Spencer's milkshake, pretty good deal. But you can't go wrong really anywhere you go in Mississippi. But the Delta is a must. Natchez is a must. Oxford is a must. And I'll add, for good measure, just in case you don't get the picture at that point, go to Philadelphia and check out Marty Stewart's Congress of Country Music. What do people get wrong about Mississippi and Mississippians? This is a question I ask everyone on the show. And I think it's the thing that people got wrong about me when I first moved to Boston to go to college, that maybe we are all uneducated, barefoot, and backwards in our views. I think you can go anywhere and you take 100 people, you're going to find 5 people who are racist. You're going to find 5 people who are ignorant. You're going to find 5 people who are barefoot. Mississippi's no different. We got a little bit of everybody and a little bit of everything. But in Mississippi, we can't escape the fact that the past hangs in the air, that more often than not, Mississippians have to wake up, get out of bed, and go about their day under the worst of headlines. They have to put their best foot forward when the whole world is pointing at the one idiot who did something dumb or wrong, and then the whole world assumes that the whole state's like that. I think people get wrong about Mississippi, too, that there's nothing to see there. There's so much history and so much culture and music and food. Oh, my goodness. If you're just a foodie, come to Mississippi for that alone. Doe's Eat Place is worth the trip. And if you don't believe me, go back to the episode with Wright Thompson and hear his pitch for Doe's. There's a reason U.S. presidents made a stop there to eat. Go to the Neshoba County Fair. The culture of Native Americans in Mississippi is so strong. The Choctaw, and they still have a thriving culture. It's perhaps no better represented than in Philadelphia today, where Choctaw and white and black all come together to form this beautiful community. Now, what makes Mississippi the birthplace of America's music? I go back to what I said about the American Revolution and New England being this ground zero for our nation's founding. Just as much, Mississippi is ground zero for, see what I did there, Morgan Freeman, talking about your blues club? It is ground zero for the second act of America, the one that was born when we bent our arc a little more towards justice after Civil War, and 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment were put into law. All of that pain, all of that story, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the music that has come from Mississippi could not have come from Mississippi had all those other things not happened. If you look at the trajectory of Muddy Waters' life, you've got people, Alan Lomax, coming from the Library of Congress to Parchman Farm to record the prisoners there because the field hollers that they're singing there are these sort of stuck-in-time bits of music that everywhere else on planet Earth outside that 28 square mile patch of land that is Parchman, the blues evolved into what we knew it to be by the 1930s, where Muddy Waters is starting to enter the picture. These field hollers that were really more true to what the blues was in 1900, they're alive there on Parchman. Alan Lomax is going there for a reason, to capture that for a reason. He's going to Muddy Waters' front porch in that one-room cabin that you can see in the Blues Museum in Clarksdale for a reason. These are the bones upon which everything else is built. Country, blues, rock and roll. There's a reason Keith Richards and Mick Jagger formed the Rolling Stones when they met on a subway, a tube platform, if you will, in London. And they looked at each other and they were each holding a Muddy Waters record under their arm. We might not have the Rolling Stones if it weren't for Mississippi. I just believe that America's music comes from Mississippi because, like I said, it is ground zero. All the cultural factors came together. All of the pain needed a place to go. And one of the best ways to process that is through song. And some of the best people to ever do it were doing that at ground zero in Mississippi. And they still are today. Look at what Hardy writes when he writes a song. Look at Hayley Williams from Paramore. Check out her records. She's doing the same thing. And I think Mississippi has a bright future of continued artistic greatness in that sense. Who's on your Mississippi Mount Rushmore? I'm going to do two for y'all. I'm going to do the one that, if you catch our prior episodes, that I usually speak to as my personal Mount Rushmore, right? So B.B. King, because that's how I learned to play the electric guitar. That's learning to play to B.B. King records. So B.B. King goes on there. Marty Stuart, because he was the first person I could point to and say, man, he's doing what I want to do, and he's from where I'm from. Maybe I can do it too. And then I got to put Mac McAnally on there, because Mac is an artist in his own right, yes. But he's also a great musician, yes. He's also a great songwriter, yes. He's also a great storyteller, yeah. And he wears his Mississippi on his sleeve and carries it in the way that he is kind and gracious to people. So in terms of an aspirational figure, I want to be him when I grow up. That's Mac McAnally for me. And Pop Staples, because I think Pop Staples, in the same way as B.B. King, and in some ways like Mac McAnally, he was famous for saying during the Civil Rights era, if Dr. King can preach it, we can sing it. And so he wrote songs like Freedom Highway at a time that the world needed a song like that. And I'll Take You There. We may hear Mavis singing it, but go back and listen again a little more deeply, and it's Pop's right hand playing that guitar that makes those recordings so Mississippi and so deeply moving. Now here's another Mississippi Mount Rushmore for you that I've developed as a more, this one's for the world, and this one extends beyond music for me. This is people from Mississippi, in my opinion, that have made such a great impact in moving the state forward. I want to start with Myrlie Evers. For reasons I explained earlier. Just like Medgar, she was doing the hard work at the time as a woman. I don't know that she was able to be given the same amount of credit for the work she was doing, but she was doing just as much of the work as Medgar. And then when he sadly was assassinated so early on in that story, she carried the work forward. And she wrote the book, and she spoke the speech. She was head of the NAACP, and she makes me proud to be from Mississippi. I got to add William Winter, got to get a Grenada person up on there. But reading William Winter's story and seeing how, he was governor at a time when you could only be governor for one term in Mississippi, but he brought kindergarten to Mississippi. We were the last state in the union not to have it. He made sure it happened. He gave teachers a pay raise, and he used every bit of his grace and kindness and bipartisanship. All these characters we could use more of today. Boy, we could use a William Winter in the world today. And so for all the reasons, in a lifetime of service, and an example of someone whose views and mind expanded and evolved and grew over the course of his lifetime, William Winter. All right. Third, Muddy Waters. I was always a B.B. King guy, but talking to Wright Thompson and listening to Muddy Waters now, that I understand his story, and I understand Muddy Waters in the 1940s in Mississippi, acoustic, is not the same as Muddy Waters in Chicago in the 50s and 60s, electric, and what he did and what he said and the power of that. And even there's a great story that Wright recalls in his episode of this podcast. Towards the end of Muddy's life, he's actually free from his record contract he'd been in all those years, where he didn't really get to participate in ownership of his own recordings. He's in the studio with all these, new generation musicians who look up to him as a hero, and they're geeking out because it's Muddy Waters. Well, Muddy Waters is bringing the heat because it's the first time in his 70-something years of life that he's singing for him. He gets to own what they record that day. And his story is powerful and in many ways mirrors the story of Mississippi itself. So we got Myrlie Evers, we got William Winter, we got Muddy Waters, and I'm going to keep Marty Stuart on that list because Marty is a part of the bridge. He is the bridge. He's a part of what country music was, where it comes from. First gig, Lester Flatt. He's married to Connie Smith, who he fell in love with when she came to Philadelphia, Mississippi when he was, 13? And he knew that day, I'm going to marry that lady someday, and he did. He's also a part of the future. He's a mentor to guys like me. He is out there today, I guarantee he's out somewhere playing country music for a new audience, preaching the good news about country music, about Mississippi, moving things forward, changing minds, and investing back in the place that raised him, which is Philadelphia and the Congress of Country Music. And there's a direct line from Jimmy Rogers to Marty Stuart to Hardy. Marty is that bridge, and for that reason, I think he belongs on that Mississippi Mount Rushmore. So that's my other Mississippi Mount Rushmore. I'll leave y'all today with a little bit of news about what I have going on in my world. It's 2026 when you hear this. I am loving my life in Nashville, Tennessee, playing on records as a session musician, writing songs, both for myself and for other people. Touring. Spent the last few years touring in Dierks Bentley's touring band. I'm bowing out of that. I've got a new record that'll be out this year. And as a matter of fact, it's very likely that within a week or two of you hearing this, I'll have the first song from that record out in the world. And I'll be touring more this year. I'll be putting out new music. I'll be hosting this podcast, talking to some of my Mississippi favorites and friends of Mississippi favorites. And I think we're going to expand the work of this podcast to include the full story of Mississippi, whether that is our culinary traditions, our tradition of the written word, the civil rights history and the American history that occurred here. And, it's a perfect time to do it too. The 250th year of America being America. I think Mississippi is perfectly poised right now to be front and center and to be the star of the show. I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen and to be a part of it in the music that I make. I hope that you will follow along both through this podcast, through all my social media channels. I'm easy to find. It's Charlie with a CHARLIE, and then Worsham, like worship, like you can go to church, but instead of IP at the end, AM, like AM radio, like that AM radio station that Craig Wiseman was talking about loving when he grew up. And I hope you'll listen to my new music, and I hope you'll tune in wherever you see me having a conversation with folks, because I guarantee you I'm going to slip a little Mississippi into every single one of those songs, every single one of those conversations. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please keep coming back. I love getting to do this. I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful to the folks that visit Mississippi and all the amazing guests that we've had. Grateful to be from Mississippi and to have a chance to represent it. I hope I do it justice. I'll see y'all down the road.
Mississippi on the Map is brought to you by Visit Mississippi. Learn more at visitmississippi.org. Your host for Mississippi on the Map is yours truly, Charlie Worsham. You can check out my latest tour dates and music at charlieworsham.com. The show is engineered by Troy Dixon.